Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. The historical blueprint of a great Argead saga, ALEXEIN. Volume 1, Telesias, The War Dance. By Makāula Nakae. Audio essay. Episode 14, The Strategic Landscape and Economic Revolution of Ancient Macedon. Welcome back to Divine Oracle, Unwritten Words Behind My Novel. I am Makāula Nakae. When we construct an epic historical narrative like ALEXEIN, it is easy to get swept away by the psychological trauma of the palace or the dramatic clashing of spears on the front lines. But to truly understand how a fragmented, bleeding northern territory suddenly rose to swallow the known world, we must strip away the romance and look at the hard, unyielding physics of the earth. We must look at grand strategy, topography, and resource monopoly. In the hyper-volatile political theater of 4th century BCE Greece, Macedonia's geographic location was never a mere passive backdrop. It was a lethal weapon. While the celebrated southern city-states like Athens, Sparta, and Thebes had spent centuries dominating the Aegean, their imperial ambitions were permanently choked by small territories, rocky soil, and exhausted natural resources. Macedonia, by contrast, sat upon a goldmine of raw materials that the south desperately required to survive. Its position as a vast, vulnerable crossroads between the Aegean Sea and the wild Balkan interior was both its historic curse and its ultimate geopolitical leverage. Under the calculating intellect of King Philip II, this rugged frontier underwent an absolute economic and structural revolution, transforming a loose collection of tribal baronies into a centralized superpower. Topography is destiny, the natural fortress. The physical geography of Macedonia was an incredible double-edged matrix of massive vulnerability and profound defensive strength. To the south lay the arrogant city-states, to the north and west hung the relentless, predatory tribal coalitions of the Illyrians, Thracians, and Paeonians. Yet, the Macedonian heartland was cradled by a spectacular natural defense barrier. Towering mountain ranges, anchored by the mineral-rich heights of Mount Pangaeon, acted as a massive stone shield, breaking the momentum of barbarian raids before they could butcher the lowland settlements. This relative geographic isolation allowed the early Argead kings a critical operational buffer to slowly consolidate their internal asset networks. Beneath these mountain shields lay the true agricultural engine of the state, the immense hyperfertile river plains of the Axios and the Haliacmon. Unlike the southern Peloponnese or Attica, where the soil was notoriously rocky, drained, and structurally incapable of supporting population booms, Macedonia's broad river basins yielded a steady, massive agricultural surplus. This did not merely mean wealth, it meant raw numbers. It meant a vast, well-fed peasant populace that Philip could eventually draft, discipline, and re-engineer into the largest, most physically imposing professional standing army the Mediterranean had ever seen. The monopoly of force, wood, silver, and gold. The true foundation of Macedonia's sudden shift from a provincial backwater to an international hegemon lay in its absolute monopoly over two vital, high-value strategic resources: high-grade naval timber and precious metals. By the 4th century BCE, the southern Greek peninsula had been devastatingly deforested by centuries of non-stop shipbuilding, urban construction, and silver smelting. Athens, whose entire global empire was anchored completely by its massive, elite naval fleet, was trapped in a state of absolute resource dependency. Macedonia's endless, dense forests, particularly the massive stands of high-quality silver fir in the Thracian borderlands, made the Argead crown the primary, if not the solitary, supplier of the essential lumber required to build and repair the classic warship of the era, the trireme. Philip II understood this leverage perfectly. By tightly controlling the timber routes, Macedonia held a functional veto over Athenian naval ambitions. The king could choke or clear the supply lines at will, utilizing his wood as an insidious diplomatic weapon to paralyze Athenian aggression long before a single Macedonian soldier ever marched south. Equally devastating to the balance of power was the mineral wealth beneath the Macedonian mountains. While Athens had funded its 5th century golden age using the silver mines of Lauren, those deposits were in a state of terminal, bankrupt decline by the time Philip seized the throne in 359 BCE. Through a sequence of swift, brilliant military interventions along the Thracian frontier, Philip captured the legendary gold and silver veins of Mount Pangaeon, seizing the strategic city of Crenides and renaming it Philippi, He immediately centralized the mining operations, completely re-engineering the infrastructure to extract an astronomical, unprecedented yield of over 1,000 talents of pure gold annually. This ocean of bullion flooded the Mediterranean economy, permanently altering international exchange rates. With this endless capital, Philip accomplished what no Greek city-state could dream of. He paid his soldiers year-round, professionalizing the phalanx. He funded the cutting-edge developmental research of his elite engineers, inventing terrifying new mechanical siege artillery. And he systematically bought the souls of his enemies. Philip famously boasted that no city wall was too high if an ass laden with gold could be driven through its gates. He deployed his wealth like liquid iron, bribing southern politicians, funding treasonous pro-Macedonian factions within Athens and Thebes, and causing his enemies to tear themselves apart from within through manufactured civil discord. The port of Pella, the navigable nexus. Macedonia's natural geometry also transformed it into the premier commercial crossroads of the northern Aegean. At the end of the 5th century BCE, King Archelaus had made the radical, visionary decision to relocate the royal capital from the ancient landlocked ancestral seat of Aegae to Pella. Pella was masterfully selected for its unique dual-advantage topography. It was not a conventional, exposed coastal harbor, vulnerable to sudden naval blockades. Instead, it sat inland upon the shores of a massive, deep, and completely navigable lagoon, connected to the Thermaic Gulf and the open Aegean Sea through a secure river channel. This layout turned Pella into an unassailable, island-like fortress that functioned simultaneously as a bustling international maritime emporium. Great paved trade roads stretched directly from the royal docks into a colossal 7-hectare central marketplace, the Agora. Through this port moved the raw wealth of the Balkan interior, hides, cattle, grain, and hemp, colliding directly with the high-end luxury items, elite pottery, and wine imports of the Greek south. Pella became a sophisticated, wealthy urban center, anchoring the regional economy and generating massive domestic customs revenues that further filled the coffers of the Argead house. The metamorphosis from bankruptcy to Persian extortion. To truly appreciate the genius of Philip's economic revolution, we must understand the absolute wreckage he inherited. Before 359 BCE, Macedonia was a fragile pastoral patchwork of near-bankrupt lowland settlements, constantly fractured by the insubordination of upper Macedonian highland barons. The economy was primitive, relying on transhuman pastoralism, the slow, seasonal movement of livestock across mountain slopes. The crown was too broke to maintain a standing force, leaving the frontiers wide open to the devastating slaughter of Illyrian invasions. Philip recognized that financial reform was the prerequisite for military survival. He drained the expansive low-lying swamps to create hyperproductive farmland, forcibly settled the roaming pastoral tribes into unified agricultural towns, and seized control of vital international coastal ports like Amphipolis. He transformed a weak agrarian economy into a centralized, resource-driven imperial machine. When Philip was struck down by an assassin's blade in 336 BCE, he did not merely leave his son, Alexander III, a well-drilled army. He left him an unburdensome, hypercapitalized financial empire. Alexander did not need to invent an economic architecture. He merely took his father's perfected machine and unleashed it upon Asia. Alexander's subsequent victories did not just defeat armies, they captured wealth on a scale that altered the human imagination. The systemic seizure of the ancient Persian royal treasuries at Damascus, Susa, and the final brutal purge of Persepolis liberated thousands of tons of accumulated gold and silver bullion that had been locked away for centuries. This astronomical wave of wealth was dragged back into the Mediterranean, triggering immense currency inflation, stabilizing a unified pan-Hellenic monetary standard, and funding the construction of dozens of new, strategic urban centers. The financial infrastructure that Philip II carefully carved out of the rugged northern mountains eventually became the global economic engine that sustained the entire Hellenistic world, long after his son died in Babylon. In ALEXEIN, we do not pass over these material realities. We map the physical forge of the state, demonstrating that the vanguard of the Argead dynasty was built on an unyielding foundation of stone, timber, gold, and absolute grand strategy. Tune in for our next daily drop tomorrow as we continue to dissect the bloodlines of antiquity. ALEXEIN, a great Argead saga. Volume 1, Telesias, the War Dance. Unearth the ultimate historical drama. We are releasing a brand new episode every single day until the epic conclusion of Volume 1. Each chapter delivers a tight, hyper-focused, 5 to 15-minute hit of cinematic historical drama, the perfect daily plunge into the ancient world. Watch the cinematic video trailer. Listen to the full saga now. Bookmark Volume 1, Telesias playlist. Subscribe to follow the rise of the Argead dynasty. Thumbs up to help push our vanguard through the algorithm's gauntlet. Comment below. Was Philip II's aggressive centralization of Macedonia's natural monopolies born out of a pure, desperate need for immediate border survival? Or did he systematically plan the total economic strangulation and subjugation of southern Greece from the very first hour he seized the crown? Let me know your breakdowns in the comments below.